We noticed the quiet first, not the kind that belongs to a nice restaurant, but the kind that gathers when a place is set for people who don't arrive. Marlowe Bennett's experience matters because it wasn't one dramatic betrayal that broke her. It was the steady, familiar absence that taught her what her family considered optional. This is how Marlowe tells it. The hostess smiled like she'd practiced it in a mirror. Right this way. I followed her past low-lit tables in soft laughter, holding my phone like it was part of my hand now. She led me to a corner table with 5 place settings and a small cake in the center that looked too perfect to touch. 4 empty chairs. I set my purse on the chair beside me, the one closest to the wall, like I was trying to make myself smaller. My emerald blouse felt like a mistake the second I sat down. Too dressed up. Too hopeful. A waiter appeared with a glass of red wine and paused when he saw the table. He didn't look surprised. That was the worst part. "Happy birthday," he offered, gentle. "Would you like me to bring menus for the others, or wait a bit?" "Just wait," I replied. My voice came out steady, like it belonged to someone who knew what she was doing. "They're coming." He nodded once and stepped back like he'd learned how to leave people alone without making it obvious. I checked my phone. No replies in the family group chat. No missed calls. No nothing. I tried again anyway, because I always tried again. I typed, "I'm here." "We're at the corner table," and stared at it until the words started to look wrong. Then I deleted it and set the phone down. The cake sat there like a witness. A couple at the table across from me leaned close, sharing a bite of something, laughing with their heads tilted together. A server passed with a tray of cocktails. Someone at the bar cheered. The whole room kept moving while I stayed stuck in one small place. My phone buzzed once and my chest lifted. Fast. A notification from a shipping app. I let out a breath through my nose and pressed my lips together hard enough to feel the edges of my lipstick. 2 weeks ago, I'd gotten the call that changed everything. $1,200,000 in seed funding. The first real yes after years of no. My company, Lumenroot, had started on my kitchen counter with a cheap scale and a notebook full of formulas. I'd spent nights cleaning beakers while my friends posted engagement photos and weekend trips. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Dinner, cake, a few minutes where my family looked at me like I mattered. I'd texted them days ago. Thursday, 7. I made a reservation. I sent a reminder. I sent another. Nothing. My thumb tapped the table without me meaning to. The waiter came back. Slower this time, like he didn't want to break something. "Would you like another 15 minutes?" "Please." He glanced at the chairs again, then at my face, then away. Of course. We watched her keep her shoulders square anyway, like posture could hold the day together. I opened the group chat and scrolled up through my own messages lined up like little unanswered knocks. At 16, my dad took my brother Logan fishing in Montana for 2 weeks. I remembered standing in the driveway with my backpack, pretending I was just curious. "Can I come?" Dad had ruffled my hair like I was a kid asking to sit at the grown-ups' table. "You need stability. He needs investment. Stability." That word followed me everywhere. I stared at the empty chairs until my eyes stung, then forced myself to look at the entrance again, like I could will them through the door. A shadow stopped at my table. A man stood there, mid-40s, charcoal suit, kind eyes behind glasses. He didn't smile too big. He didn't pity me. He just looked at the cake and then at me, like he'd landed on something he wasn't sure he was allowed to see. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice low, almost careful. "I don't mean to intrude. I only noticed." I straightened a little. "It's fine." He hesitated. "If it is your birthday. Happy birthday. Thank you." He glanced at the other chairs again, then back at me. "Would it be strange if I sat for a minute just until your guests arrive?" I didn't know why I nodded, maybe because the word guests sounded less humiliating than family. He pulled out the chair across from me and settled in without making a show of it. "I'm Caleb. Marlowe." My throat tightened. "Marlowe Bennett. Caleb folded his hands on the table, not touching anything, like he didn't want to take up more space than he'd been offered. So, he murmured, eyes flicking briefly to the cake, then back to me. Big night. I let out a short breath that sounded almost like a laugh. It was supposed to be. The waiter came back with menus and hesitated when he saw Caleb sitting there. I gave a small nod. You can leave them. He slid one menu in front of me anyway. Habit. Muscle memory. Then he stepped away again. I stared at the menu without opening it. The words blurred together. I closed my first round of funding 2 weeks ago. I said. Saying it out loud still felt strange, like borrowing someone else's accomplishment. 1,200,000. Seed funding. Caleb's eyebrows lifted, just slightly. That's not small. No, I swallowed. It took years. He waited. That seemed to be his thing, waiting without pushing. My company started in my kitchen. I went on. Cheap scale. Sticky notes everywhere. I worked my day job, then came home and made product until midnight. Sometimes later, I rubbed my thumb against the edge of the table. The wood was smooth, recently refinished. When the funding came through, I thought, this would be the moment. Dinner. Cake. Normal family stuff. I glanced at the empty chairs again. I invited them here. Caleb nodded once. They knew what tonight was. They knew. My phone was still face down, but I could feel it there, like it was warm. I texted. Then I reminded. Then I confirmed. Nothing. He leaned back slightly, giving me room. That silence can be loud. It's familiar. I replied before I could stop myself. The wine glass in front of me was still full. I picked it up, took a small sip, set it back down. My hand shook just enough to annoy me. My brother used to get birthday dinners like this. I added, big ones. My parents would drive hours if they had to. For me, it was usually a card, sometimes late. Caleb didn't react right away. Then, quietly, and you still invited them. Yeah. I pressed my lips together. I always do. The waiter returned with a lighter and gestured toward the cake. Would you like me to light it now? I hesitated, then nodded. Sure. He lit the candles one by one. The flames wavered, then steadied. He stepped back. Caleb watched the candles, then looked at me. Do you want to wait? I glanced at the entrance again. No movement that mattered. No. I leaned forward and blew them out in one breath. Smoke curled up, thin and quick, then disappeared. Caleb shifted in his chair. For what it's worth, he said, voice low. Someone should have shown up for that. My chest tightened. I looked down at the cake, then back at him. They didn't. He nodded, like he believed me. The cake sat between us, candles gone. Frosting slightly melted at the edges. Caleb broke off a small piece with his fork and waited, like he wasn't sure if it was allowed. Is your family always like this? I stared at the plate. Consistent. I said, that's probably the nicest word for it. He tilted his head. Listening. When I was 16, my dad took my brother Logan on a fishing trip to Montana. I went on. 2 weeks. Just the two of them. Caleb glanced up. You didn't go. I shook my head. I asked. I remember standing in the driveway with my backpack half packed, like I could will it to happen. I paused, the memory sharp enough to feel recent. My dad smiled like I was cute, told me I needed stability, told me Logan needed investment. Caleb's fork stopped midair. He actually said that, word for word. I pressed my fingers together in my lap. Stability meant staying home, watching the house, being responsible. Logan got the fun things, the risks, the second chances. Caleb set his fork down slowly, and that didn't change. No, I let out a breath. It just got more expensive. The waiter drifted by to refill water glasses. I thanked him without looking up. When I was 22, Logan bought a motorcycle. I continued. He didn't have the credit for it. My parents asked me to co-sign. Caleb's eyebrows lifted. That's a big ask. I'd just graduated. Student loans. First real job. I hesitated. I smiled without humor. My mom told me family helps family. He nodded once, tight. How much? 22,000. The number landed heavy in my mouth. Logan promised he'd handle it. I took another sip of wine. It tasted flatter now. He made the first few payments. I said, then stopped. Caleb didn't interrupt. I covered it. 8 months. Quietly. I didn't want my credit ruined. My dad thanked me by nodding while helping Logan install custom exhaust pipes. Caleb leaned back, one arm crossing his chest. Did anyone ever offer to pay you back? I shrugged. It was assumed I could handle it. The room felt warmer than before. Or maybe I was just tired. I'm good in emergencies, I added. I'm good when things fall apart. They know that. Caleb looked at the empty chairs again. So tonight wasn't a surprise. No. I shook my head. It just hurt anyway. The waiter came by with 2 forks and small plates, setting them down without comment. Caleb nudged the cake toward me. You should eat some. I picked up my fork, hesitated, then cut a bite. I always do what's practical. He smiled faintly. Stability? Exactly. I took a bite and chewed. Slow. I learned early which role was mine. We ate the cake slowly, like neither of us wanted to be the one who finished it. Caleb set his fork down and wiped his fingers on a napkin. You talk about all this very calmly. I shrugged. It's easier that way. Easier than what Thon letting it spill everywhere. I gestured vaguely at the table. The room, the night. I learned early that being upset didn't change the outcome. Being useful did. He nodded, absorbing that. Useful how? Covering gaps? Fixing things before anyone else noticed they were broken. I paused, making it so no one had to worry. Caleb leaned back in his chair, one ankle resting over the other. That's a heavy job for a kid. I didn't think of it as a job. I smiled faintly. It was just normal. The waiter stopped by to ask if we wanted coffee. Caleb glanced at me first. I shook my head. Just water. Thanks. When the waiter left, Caleb looked toward the entrance again. Still nothing. No. I checked my phone without unlocking it. If they were coming, they would have said something by now. He didn't rush to fill the space after that. The quiet between us felt different from the quiet earlier. Less sharp. Less accusing. You didn't owe me an explanation, he said after a moment. You know that. I know. I traced the rim of my glass. But you sat down. That counts for something. Caleb smiled at that. Small and genuine. I write for a living, he offered. Mostly essays. Sometimes books. I glanced up. About people who rebuild after things fall apart. He hesitated. Not in a dramatic way. More quietly. That sounds familiar. He laughed under his breath. Yeah, it does. I studied him for a second. He wasn't trying to impress me. No resume, no polished lines. Just facts. Placed gently. And you, he asked. You don't sound like someone who enjoys attention. I don't. I took a breath. But I wanted them to see this. Just once. Caleb's gaze didn't waver. What would that have changed? I thought about it. The answer didn't come right away. I don't know. I admitted. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. The waiter returned with the check, setting it down near me. I reached for my purse automatically. Caleb held up a hand. Let me. I shook my head. You don't have to. I know. He met my eyes. I want to. I let go of the purse strap and nodded once. Okay. He slid his card into the folder without ceremony. No speech, no insistence. When the waiter left again, Caleb cleared his throat. For what it's worth. Marlowe, you didn't imagine any of this. Something in my chest loosened, just slightly. People like to pretend silence is neutral, he continued. It isn't. I looked down at the empty chairs, then back at him. "Thank you." He gave a small shrug. "I'm glad I noticed." Outside, the noise of the street filtered in as the door opened and closed. Inside, the table finally felt like it belonged to the two of us. The waiter came back to clear the plates, moving carefully around the table like he didn't want to disturb whatever had settled there. "Everything all right?" he asked, soft. "Yes," I answered. The word surprised me when it came out. "It is—" He nodded and took the cake plate, the lighter, the little signs that said birthday without anyone needing to explain it. When he left, the table felt bare in a way that wasn't uncomfortable anymore. Caleb checked his watch and shifted in his seat. "I should head out soon." "Early flight." "That makes sense." I wrapped my fingers around my glass, though there was only water left now. "Thank you for sitting with me." He smiled. "I'm glad I did." We stood at the same time, an awkward half-second where neither of us moved toward the exit. Then he picked up his jacket and slung it over his arm. "One last thing," he said, pausing. "You don't owe anyone the version of yourself they're used to." I let that land. I'm starting to see that. He nodded, satisfied, and stepped away. "Take care." "Marlowe." "You too." "Caleb." I watched him go, then reached for my phone. No new messages, no apologies racing in at the last minute. The screen stayed dark. The hostess passed by and smiled again. "Hope you enjoyed your evening?" "I did," I replied. And this time, it didn't feel like a lie. Outside, the air was cool. I stood for a moment on the sidewalk, listening to traffic, feeling the quiet hum of the city around me. My reflection stared back from the restaurant window, a little tired, a little steadier than before. I thought about the wish I'd almost made when the candles were lit. The old one, the familiar one. Instead, I closed my eyes briefly and made a different choice. Not for them to show up, not for them to change, just for me to stop waiting. I opened my eyes, slipped my phone into my bag, and started walking. 5 years passed without ceremony. Not quietly, exactly. Just steadily. Lumen Root moved out of my apartment, then out of the first shared workspace, then into a converted brick building with wide windows and drafty corners that never quite warmed up in winter. We hired slowly. We argued over labels. We fixed supply problems at midnight. We survived things I never talked about at dinner parties. By the time my phone rang that morning, the company was being valued somewhere between 32 and 35 million, depending on who was running the numbers. The screen lit up with my mother's name. I stared at it until the second ring stopped, then started again. I answered on the third. "Marlowe," she said, bright, careful. "Hi, sweetheart." "Hi, Mom." A pause, just long enough to feel intentional. "We have news," she continued. "Logan's getting married. That's good." I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking. "Congratulations to him. We're all very excited." She said, "It made me think about how far you've come, about family." I closed my eyes briefly. She went on, voice warming. "Your father and I were wondering if you might want to be involved, maybe help with some of the planning, or even something bigger." "Bigger how?" "Well," she cleared her throat. "Your company has done so well. Lumen Root and the Bennett name together. It could be beautiful." I didn't answer right away. The office hummed outside my door. Someone laughed near the coffee machine. "I'll think about it," I said. "Of course," she replied quickly. "Just wanted to open the conversation." We hung up. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. "Logan, hey sis. Big news. Wedding stuff is expensive. Thought I'd reach out. I'm putting together a racing season. Need a primary sponsor. About 200,000 should cover it. Great exposure." I set the phone down and stared at my desk. A small plant sat near the edge, leaves curling toward the light. I'd bought it myself. It was still alive. Caleb knocked lightly and stepped in without waiting for an answer. "You okay?" My family found my number again. I said. He nodded like that told him plenty. I picked up the phone and typed, "Congrats on the wedding. I'm not able to fund that. Hope the planning goes well." The reply came fast. Wow. Didn't expect that. Thought family supported family. Caleb leaned against the doorframe. You don't have to respond right now. I know. I set the phone face down. But I also know how this goes. The silence that followed felt familiar, heavy, expectant. Outside my office, the work kept moving. Orders processed, meetings scheduled. A company built on quiet persistence continued without asking who approved of it. My phone stayed dark. For the first time, that didn't feel like something I needed to fix. I found out from someone else. My assistant, Emma, leaned into my doorway with her tablet tucked against her chest. James Harrington called. She said, "He asked if you had a few minutes today." My stomach tightened, slow and steady. Did he say why? She shook her head, just that it was important. I nodded once. Set it up. The call came an hour later. James's face filled the screen, glasses low on his nose, the familiar office behind him. He didn't waste time. "Your brother reached out to me yesterday," he said. I kept my voice even. About he exhaled through his nose. He implied there might be instability at the company, family issues affecting leadership. He used those words. I felt heat rise in my neck. He doesn't have any role here. I know. James folded his hands. That's why I asked legal to log the call. It's documented. I looked past the screen at the window, at the traffic inching along below. Did he contact anyone else? Not that we're aware of, but the board has been informed. He paused. I wanted you to hear it from me. Thank you. There was a brief silence. James watched me carefully, like he was measuring how much pressure to apply. You don't owe them access, he said finally, or explanations. The numbers speak for themselves. I appreciate that. He nodded once. So do we. When the call ended, I stayed seated for a moment, hands flat on the desk. My phone buzzed. Logan, hey, just talked to one of your money guys. Wanted to make sure everyone's on the same page. No need to get defensive. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then I set the phone down without replying. Caleb appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, jacket slung over his shoulder. You look like someone crossed a line. He did. I leaned back, the chair creaking. He called an investor. Caleb's jaw tightened. That's not ignorance. That's strategy. I nodded. It's also recorded. He let out a breath. Good. I didn't think he'd go that far. Caleb met my eyes. You've always been the quiet solution. He's panicking now that the quiet stopped. Emma tapped the doorframe again. Legal sent over a summary. She said, "Do you want to review it now or later?" Now, I replied. The document was short. Factual, dates, times, language used, no emotion, no room for interpretation. I signed off and handed the tablet back. Thank you. When Emma left, the office felt smaller, or maybe sharper. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. I didn't answer. Caleb watched me set the phone face down. You okay? I am, I said, surprised to find it true. But something's different now. He nodded. There's no pretending left. Outside, the building hummed with late afternoon movement. Inside, a boundary hardened into something solid. The line had been crossed, and I wasn't stepping back over it. They showed up on a Tuesday. No warning, no appointment. Just my mother's name flashing on the receptionist's screen. Followed by Logan's, spelled wrong the way he always spelled it when he was in a hurry. Emma's voice came through the intercom. Your family is here. I closed the spreadsheet I'd been staring at and stood. Give me 5 minutes. Caleb looked up from the chair in the corner. Want me there? Yes. The conference room smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. When I walked in, My mother was already seated at the table, hands folded neatly on top of a bakery box tied with twine. Logan stood by the window, phone in hand, pacing like this was a pit stop. "Marlowe," my mother said, smiling too fast. We were in the neighborhood. Logan grinned, thought we'd stop by and see the Empire. I gestured to the chairs. "Sit." They did. The box stayed centered, like an offering. My mother slid it toward me. "We brought cake. To celebrate everything you've accomplished." I didn't touch it. Logan glanced around the room. "This place is bigger than I expected." "We're doing fine," I replied. My mother cleared her throat. "We didn't mean for things to feel strained. Families misunderstand each other sometimes." Caleb shifted beside me but stayed quiet. Logan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You didn't even counter. 200,000 isn't that much at your level." I opened my laptop and turned it so they could see the screen. A list filled the display. Dates, notes, amounts written out carefully. My mother's smile faltered. "What's this everything?" I said. "Every time I covered for you, for Logan, for the family." Logan squinted. "What are you doing?" "Being clear." I scrolled slowly. Motorcycle loan payments. 8 months. Emergency rent. Insurance gaps. Repairs. Interest I paid so your credit wouldn't collapse. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. "Marlowe, this feels very transactional." "It is." My voice stayed steady. 92,600. The number sat between us, heavy and exact. Logan scoffed. "So what? You're billing us now." "No." I closed the laptop. "I'm closing the account." My mother's voice sharpened. "After everything we've done for you," I met her eyes. "This company is not a family ATM." The room went quiet. Logan stood abruptly. "You've changed." I stopped pretending. I answered. My mother gathered her purse, movements stiff. "We raised you better than this. You raised me to handle things alone." I said, "I just finally accepted the job." They left without taking the cake. Caleb waited until the door clicked shut. "You okay?" I nodded. My hands were shaking now that it was over. Outside the glass wall, my team kept working. Phones rang. Laughter drifted down the hall. I stayed where I was, breathing through it, watching the reflection of a woman who didn't look away anymore. I went to the wedding for 3 hours, not because anyone convinced me, because I decided I could. The ballroom was bright and carefully styled, the kind of place that looks good in photos no matter what's happening underneath. I hugged Logan. I congratulated his wife. I smiled when the photographer pointed a camera my way. When my father raised a glass, his hands were steady. His face was flushed with champagne and laughter. He looked healthy, solid. I noticed it without reacting, like you notice weather you can't control anymore. My mother found me near the dessert table. "You look well," she said, quieter than usual. "So do you." A pause settled between us. Not warm, not hostile. Just there. "We should talk more," she offered. "Sunday afternoons work best." I replied. "Half an hour." She nodded, like she was filing it away. We both knew this wasn't reconciliation. It was adjustment. Caleb squeezed my hand once as we left. No commentary. He didn't need to say anything. A year later, the kitchen felt full, not crowded. Full in the right way. A small cake sat on the counter. No writing, no candles yet. Just something sweet. Waiting. Rachel leaned against the island, glass in hand, telling a story that didn't need a punchline. Caleb moved between the stove and the sink, tasting, adjusting, humming under his breath. The company crossed a valuation of $45 million that spring. It showed up in an email I read twice, then closed. We ordered takeout that night, ate on the couch, talked about a trip we might take in the fall. The doorbell rang just as Rachel was cutting the cake. I opened the door to find Elena Morales standing there, notebook hugged to her chest. She looked nervous, hopeful, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. "Sorry to drop by," she said. "I didn't know who else to talk to." "Come in," I told her. "We've got cake." Later, after everyone left, Caleb lit one candle and set it in front of me. "Make a wish," he said. I didn't close my eyes right away. I thought about the table in Rhino, the empty chairs, the years I spent believing presence was something you earned by being useful. Then I leaned forward and blew the candle out. It took me a long time to understand this, but Marlowe Bennett doesn't need an audience to matter. She just needed to stop disappearing from her own life. If this story stayed with you, you already know why.